believe, more importantly than me just giving you information now, try to listen to the thing that the Holy Spirit is saying to you. Because when it comes to visions and dreams, it's not a theoretical thing. It's about catching it more than learning it. And if you will listen to me when I say this, often when we listen for other preachers and teachers when they talk, we have our own mind is also talking. So this is what I would say in Norway, and I'll see if you will receive it. Don't think, well, that's easy for you to say because you planted a new church, because that's an excuse. That's easy for you to say because you come from a very rich country. That's easy for you to say because you have a large church. If turn off all the things that makes you maybe think that this is something that is easy for you to say. I'm trying to be principle-based when I talk today and not model-based. But sometimes when people come from, when I hear Americans talk, I have a hard time sometimes believing that I can do it in Norway. So I turn on my excuses and then I miss what's happening. So if we can just level the ground and say that what is the Holy Spirit talking to us about right now and what are the principles underneath? Because in some of the things that I say, I will lean on the model that we have in our church, and that is intimidating sometimes. But we didn't start out where we are today. We started out with 6 people in 2003. I had been the youth pastor for a church for 4 years. I took over a youth ministry of about 118 kids. And 4 years later, when I left it, I left 350 kids on Friday nights. The exact number of the 118 I took over in 2000, I had trained the same exact number, not the exact individuals, but 118 small group leaders. Because I early on understood that if I'm going to build a church of the pattern of the New Testament church, I need to focus on what's happening in the big church and what's happening in the small church. So when I did my concentration in seminary in the United States, I studied cell groups. I studied how to do a cell church in a very good way. And it just got me that the pattern of the New Testament church is gather in the temple, gather in the small group, gather in the temple, gather in the small group. And I could do a whole lecture for a week with you to talk through the different models and how some people love the small group side of things. But when they forget the big church thing, they at least in our part of the world, they kind of just disappear. And the people that just only want the big church thing, they also just disappear in consumerism and attendance and numbers and buildings on the other side. So I believe that there is a balance. So I saw this. I saw it very clearly as a pattern, and I will come into that in a little bit. But when I saw as a youth pastor that I need to build a church that is less busy but more focused, Sunday small group, Sunday small group, I made a decision. I'll see if I can do this for some other people than just the people that are in our church. So when the pastor in that Pentecostal church asked me, would you want to take over this church, the second largest Pentecostal church in the country? And I said, you know what? It's flattering, but you know what? In my heart, I see something else. And the elders of the church, they said, well, we have asked so many leaders to take on responsibilities that they're not called for, so we will let you go and do this thing. So they let me plant a new church in that same city, and now 10 years after, we're doing quite well with our church. And we have 2 sites, 2 congregations, and we have a church plant going that we will launch now in the fall. We're also going to plant an international service this fall in the student center, and we will also target a new part of our town from the fall of 2015. So in a 10 years time, I left what I saw and knew that I had, and I ventured forth as a 29-year-old to see that what I see in here, I could see out here. And for me, that's vision. Vision is what you see when you close your eyes is more important than what you see when you have your open eyes. In spiritual leadership, it's about calling forth the things that are not as if they are. And those words can become misty and unclear sometimes, but I believe that it is the challenge of us as leaders to make sure that we clarify vision. And I've learned this as a charismatic, spirit-filled person, that I can ask God for more clarification. And that is not just for the Pentecostals and the charismatics, that's for all God's people. We can ask Him, dear Lord, clarify this for me. Pastor Yonggi Cho, the pastor of the largest church in the world, he said this, clear result. Clear result. Unclear result. Unclear result. I'll say it in proper English. If you have a clear vision, you'll have a clear result. If you have an unclear vision, you'll have an unclear result. Now, the unclear result sometimes becomes the excuse. And excuses are the scariest thing that we can ever make in Christian ministry. Because when we make excuses, we don't have to change. I made a pact with God, dear Lord, help me be responsible. Help me see clearly, as clear as possible. And help me, Lord, lead with a burden that you gave me when I was young, so that I can follow that path all the way through my ministry. How do we discover a vision? Well, I have to admit that I understand that certain people have more of an inner picture. Certain people are more visionary. Certain people are more maybe have the tendency of being more visionary. But I believe that we cannot just conclude and say that that's for some people. I believe that there are many ways to come to a vision. And I want to show you a few biblical examples of how leaders got visions. I will not read the text here, but I wrote them in your manual there so that you can see it. For Isaiah, it was a meeting with God. He met God, and because he met God, something happened with the understanding that he had of himself, and he volunteered to God to become one of his men on earth. In the Pentecostal tradition, this is probably the one that we favor the most, is that someone says out loud, then I met God and everything changed. Well, for some people that is the way, but not for everyone. It is not a super spiritual glory meeting for everyone, but for Isaiah it was. For Nehemiah, it was his observation of the needs that he saw around him. But because he had an understanding of God, and because he understood who God is, what God wants, what God desires, he managed to see that the need that he saw that he needed to meet, building the walls of Jerusalem, was connected to God's destiny for his life. So he got deeply depressed. He was downcast, and the king he saw him and he said, I have this burden for the walls of Jerusalem. And then he went back and he built it up. So his way to find a vision was that he had a burden. But lots of people have, the United Nations have burdens, politicians have burdens, sociologists have burdens, lots of people have burdens. The important thing is that we connect the burden to the heart of God. And that's what Nehemiah did. Now Moses also saw after a while that my people are suffering. I belong to these people that are suffering. And then he met the burning bush. And that short story of God's interaction with Moses made Moses see himself in another way. And part of Moses' rhetoric in his talk to God there is, who am I to do this? And that happens to many of us. Who am I to do this? See, when I hear you guys working in Hungary and in Slovakia and in Czech Republic and in nations that are so secular and so difficult to reach. I admire your guts and I applaud your courage, and I pray to God that you'll succeed in what you're doing. Because that is the same thing that Moses must have felt. I have a people here after 400 years in Egypt, and I'm going to take him out of there. Who am I? But you know what? Sometimes that is the way to get a vision. For Joshua, I spoke on Joshua last week, and we do a series on the drama of God, and I talked about stepping into the land. And Joshua is one of my favorites because he managed to see with the eyes of faith, while the other ones did not see with the eyes of faith. For Joshua, it was about believing that the promise of God was more true than the strength of the people of Canaan. For Joshua, the vision came through faith because God's promise was there. And then probably the most spoken of, destiny-changing story is Saul on his way to Damascus, midday, meeting the risen Jesus Christ. And everything in Paul's letters and in Paul's theology can be pointed back to the road to Damascus. What happens on the road to Damascus is the essence and the absolute maximum, the summit of the story of Paul's life. And that was his beginning of his vision. Now, with this said, and we could have continued, I hope that you see that getting a vision can happen in many, many different ways. The point is that when we get it, we catch it. Visions are not learned. Visions are not copied from Bill Hybels' webpage. It is not taken down from my favorite ministry somewhere else in the world. It is a heartfelt, original thought. And I have to be honest with you, when I had finished my term as a youth pastor, and it was a large success story in many ways, and I was formulating the vision for our church plant, I thought it was really, really hard. Because I got stuck in formulating words and short, because so I went on these web pages for these large American ministries, and I looked over their visions and their values. And there are some Americans in the room, but I'll tell you guys, a lot of them look the same. We'll come to the reason why they look the same afterwards, because there is an argument for them to in many ways look the same, but I believe that there is some place, there is an original thought somewhere. And the best way to discover that original thought is that this is what makes my heart beat faster. This is what can make me cry. This is what makes me speed up when I talk. This is something that I have a burden for, in a way that I will hone the skill of explaining it so that it is clear for people. When you are drawn towards clarifying with passion and you are staying awake at night, you are close to original thought. And you know what? When you get original thought, Luther said this, that one word from God can get the evil one. He has that in one of his songs, that, the evil one will fall on one word from God. The meaning is this, a God-spoken word that becomes like, this is it for me. That's often enough. Some world changes and Christian leaders in the world, they've just had one word to run with. They just have this one burden. William Wilberforce, he ran his whole life. He almost died. He was dead when they abolished slavery. But he had one burden. And you know what? When we can discover the burden that we have, we're close to the vision that God wants us to have. I believe that a clear vision is a burden. It is something that we just have to do it. We just have to do what we have to do. So, we also need then, after we've gotten it, to bring it down and see if we can formulate the vision that God has given to us. Now, I believe it's very important to formulate a vision. And I don't know what your background is when it comes to the standard of a vision. There are many ways we can do this. But I have to admit for you that I think it's hard to get a vision down to a sentence. I think it's hard to get it down to a paragraph. And I think that we should not be locked up into grammar and stuff like that, because our languages are sometimes too weak and not accurate enough to get it. You know what I'm saying? You know, because some of what we look at as visions are slogans. But we are not into marketing, right? So I'm trying to set you free here. When you write down the vision for your church, it's okay that it's half a page. Okay? It's okay that it's half a page in a sheet of paper. But try to pull out some slogans from it so that people can remember it. What people remember is what sticks. If you see the swoosh, you know, if you see this one, what's that? Nike, right? The girl that came up with that one was an art student, and she probably hasn't worked since she did it. She's been paid all her life. That's very unique. But you know what? We are not into marketing, so let's not get so hung up on how we formulate it. But the point is, make it clear. And that's what God is telling the prophet here in Habakkuk 2:2. You know, write it down so that people can easily see it and run with it. I mean, there is something that happens when we understand the vision. Okay, so this is what you want. Okay, so this is the correct response to what you're asking. I gotta tell you, most people don't get stuff. Most people are pretty slow. Most people are late adopters. Most people don't get it. In the Wild West in America, you know, my cousins, they live there because my great-grandfather, he went to America. And he spent his first night underneath a canoe in Canada. Because the guy that promised him to come, he would give him work. He said, "I've never seen you before." So he slept under a canoe out in the early 1900s, out there like in the West. In the beginning in America, it was the cowboy, not the cowboy, but the trailblazer. The scout, he went first. So he had his horse, he had his gun, and he was brave, and he had probably had tattoos, and he went off. And he would have to shoot up things and take care of his life, and there were very few that went first. Right after the trailblazers came the pioneers. Who were the pioneers? Well, the pioneers were the people from Europe that were so poor that they just knew that they needed to get another life on the other side. And if you're poor and you get to New York with a boat, you need to go as far west as you can because there is the cheap farmland. So they would just go, and they knew that we have our small child, we have our cow, we have our horse, and that's all we have, and we have our guns because we need to hold on to our gun because there are wild animals and threat that has come after us. Few people left. 3% trailblazers maybe, 15% pioneers. But when they sent a message back to the to the East Coast and said, "It's safe over here now. We built some land, you know. We have the pharmacy is here. We have a school. Everything is set up. We have a little church going on here, and it's safe now. We don't bring our guns out in the farmland anymore." 80% of the people came. That's how the West was inhabited. But it wasn't because people saw it and believed it before they saw it. It was because they saw it and then believed it. I'm soon 40, but I've understood this. I'm a faith guy, but most people must see it before they believe it. It's a noble thought that people will believe it before they see it. But I've learned to understand when it comes to church planting, God gives someone the ability to close their eyes and see it. But the people around them, they don't have that. And the church planter just needs to go west and just take care of it. And get a few people with them and take care of it. And then call home and say, people, now we can build a church. And then people come. We're planting right now a church in a pub north of our city. Yesterday there were 34 people there and 4 children in a pub. 3 weeks ago we did a child dedication in that pub. I was so embarrassed. I wrote my secretary, I said, what are we doing wrong here? We're doing a child dedication in a pub. Jim Beam is looking at us, you know? And I felt so bad. But you know, something happens when you show people that this can be done. You can just see it clicks in. People see it. But people need to see it before they believe it. But as a church planter, you need to believe it before you see it. A written vision is very important. Number one, because it helps people to commit. When we go through our membership class, we bring in, always we have a course with the people that wants to attend our church, and we talk through the vision of our church in a written way. We say, this is where we are going. Because the motivation for people to join a church might be many. We like the children's ministry. It's a safe place to be with because there is no drinking and partying and crazy life here. The motivations people have for coming might not be the same as for you to build a church. So it has been a huge help for me to clarify for people why they should commit to the church. One year we had 35% of the people that attended our membership class did not join the church. That was very good. Because if people join the church when they don't know what you're about, they will try to change what you're about after a while. They go into the plane in Berlin. It says London. It said London when they bought the ticket, when they boarded the plane, and when the captain spoke. But it wasn't before they sat in the seat on the plane to London. They said, I don't want to go to London. I want to go to Prague. This is what happens in church all the time. People go with us. They go with it, but they don't get it. They don't get it that this plane is going this way. And they think that they can raise their hand and say, we're going this way. If you are going to plant a church and steer with a vision, help people to commit on what is your vision. Don't let other people's vision come in the way.
How long is your members class?
It's just a clarifying night, and most people come to it after they've been in our church for more than 6 months. So they have caught the culture before they go there. Yeah. But it is written, so they will read through a statement. Then it clarifies the picture for the future. That's very important. One of the things we say probably most often in the early state is where we are now is not where we are going. Sad to say, but many churches of 200 people find that many of the 200 that they are presently were not there in the first group of 50. Because sometimes churches like preaching to the parade. Because the people that joins the church of 50, they like church of 50. And if you don't tell them all the time that we are going to become more people, then they aim for the church of 50. So I've had people get very upset with me because we are a large church now. They said we signed up to be a relational church in a high school, and now we're over 500 people, and the rock music is so loud, my kids have to wear those things on their ears, and this isn't what I signed up for. And I'm glad that I told most of them then that this is where we're going. Because people get offended by growth in the kingdom. I don't know if they're Christian at all. Okay, sorry. A written vision gives constant motivation and inspiration. These 10 years of church planting have been very tough, especially the first 5-6 years. Leaving one of the largest youth ministries in the country, moving to a high school, not everyone being sure if it's okay. I was still invited to some places to speak, but people were kind of waiting, are they going to succeed or not? Not many people call you. not many people like you. You know, I'm not saying the conflict was high, but the hesitance of the Christian community was very high. And I had to come back to, and I had to read for myself. I needed to find my book and my drawings, and I read it for myself, and I said, you know, you're gonna lead people to a new and better life in the following of Jesus. You're gonna build a large, growing church in the city of Bergen that will multiply itself and grow. And you know, I had to read it for myself out loud. Nehemiah's experience was that it took about 40 days for the vision to disappear. After 35 days, something like that, people lay down there and they would ask, what are we doing here? So we need to come back to the vision. Vision leaks. That's why we need to come back to vision. Especially church planters needs to come back to the vision and help out with that. So how do we communicate then the vision? Well, we communicate the vision to help people to decide to keep following. Like I said, in the membership class. It's very important to help people decide to keep following. Early fall and early winter, I do a vision service in our church. So I preach all 3 services on the same subject of the vision of the church. And it's often the same thing I said last time. But I've learned that repetition is something people actually like. Because when things are repeated, people feel, I know this. And that's a wonderful confirmation for people. You know, the jokes that guys laugh the most out of are not the new jokes. They're the old jokes. So if some guys stand along with each other and say, yeah, tell that one, yeah, tell that, and they all stand there with expectancy because we know what the point is, but we laugh our way up to the point. Repetition is very good. And I make sure that repetition of a vision in a late August service in our school system, this works well for us. Late August and late January, I do a vision night. And then we try to do something extra. And I try to not be future-oriented only. I try to be value and vision-based. I cannot show up in church and say, well, people, God has spoken to us that we're going to buy a bus and a satellite and a campsite. And you're all going to pay for it. You know, I can't do that. I need to say, you know what, we are following the track of what God spoke to us. We are celebrating the fact that we are like in a stairway that goes up like this. We are at the same place this year as last year, but we are higher. Our life groups are now at 53. That's wonderful, people. Our givings to missions to our work in India has now gone up with 50% over the last 18 months. That means that we are, you know, and I can say, this is what we do, but we do it on a higher level so that you confirm people that what we said 5 years ago that we're going to do, we do it now, but these are also the fruits of it. So I try to not, you know, inspire people to keep on going. I try to reiterate what we are doing. And this is sometimes difficult because we are in a future-oriented society, a consumer-oriented society that wants something new. But I will not bow for the consumeristic idea of me being the clown, standing up there, giving people some new ideas. I've given them a vision, and we're going to follow this line now for 30 years. But we're going to be on a new... Do you get what I'm saying? Because the vision night can always turn into being like, oh, this is the new thing we're doing, and you tire out the people. People don't want to hear about the new things. They want to hear that the old thing is working. But it helps me also. It helps me be accountable for the direction of our church. That's why oral communication of the vision is very important. Like every year, I will pick 1 or 2 values that are important for me to underline in the teaching in the church. So this fall, it is about personal evangelism. I will never use the word personal evangelism, but I want people to have good conversations about faith in their everyday life. So what I do then is that I did a series of 6 weeks in January, February about the gospel. I took them through our gospel in the month of March. We read together the Gospel of Luke for 24 days. And right now, from the beginning of May to the end of June, we are now in a series called The Drama of God, where we draw the story from creation to the new heaven and the new earth. And my wife spoke 3 times yesterday about King David and him being in Christ and all this stuff. So what is my goal? Well, my goal is to, in an oral way, underline one value, personal evangelism, through the teaching of the church. But we know this is a leadership, that this year we will do this thing. Last year we did increase the Bible reading in our church. So we did 2 campaigns about getting the Bible reading up. But I don't say this because people are really bored when we tell them the organizational stuff of what we're doing. Never say it. Just put it under the table and just do the real thing. So when we as leaders know where we're going, it's easier. When you write things down as a written communication, it's also very important. Make sure that it's present on your website. Make sure that your vision is present in your letters if you write something. Not always all of it, but slogans at least that underscores it. Because you can tire people with vision also. And maybe alter the different things, but make sure that it steers in the same direction. I think that's very important. So in written communication, it's important. And the thirdly here, for organizational steering. I don't know how it is in your context, but in our context of the Norwegian culture, we are really heavily into quality control systems in large organizations. And I'm not going to go all there, but I'm going to borrow some of the language. Because every year, for the last 5 years, I have written, together with key leaders of our church, I've written a visions manual. Our visions manual is basically a 1-page description of this is the worship team in our church. And then they have goals and strategies for how to develop the mission, the worship team for the next 4 years in that. Then we have one on mission, we have one on children's ministry, one on counseling. So all the departments that are important for our church, all of those leaders gets once a year, they sit down, they own the document, and they write out what they are going to do. This is counseling in our church. This is worship. This is children's ministry. This is finance. This is giving. And the main goal for me as a senior leader is that my team thinks, strategizes, evaluates, and checks the quality of what they're doing. So we have 130 leaders in our church, so they all get one of these, about 70 pages, a manual every year. So we hand them out and we say, now if you have any question, or if you doubt if it's cool, or if you don't like what's happening, then I want you to go and read your visions manual, because in your visions manual, the worship guy explains why we do worship that way. It is in the visions manual that the children's minister explains. So I get the whole organization, the whole church, responsible to a written document, because that helps me a lot in organizational steering. And maybe some of this comes because of my background is Pentecostal charismatic. And often the confusion that happens in our tribe is that people hear things from God. I heard this, I feel this, I think that. And then you get lots of confusion. So I've kind of just locked it down and said that it's a living document. We will work with it and we will change. But within the premises of steering, it really helps me. And this all comes out of the vision of our church.
And that's once a year?
Once a year we edit it. Yeah, and hand it out. I don't think many people use it, but just the working of it is very useful.
It keeps change from happening too fast.
It keeps change from happening too fast, and it makes them look far ahead when it comes to change. Like a few years ago, we had a huge crisis in our music team because we had a leader that was not developing it, and now we know. Because now we know, I can read in that manual, we currently have 24 musicians. We only have one drummer. We need to develop 2 more drummers before 2016. And maybe this stresses you, but this is the level I have to work on. Did it start yet? No. We also started with 6 people, and then we were 42 people, and now we're 500 people. But it's harder to lead 500 than it is to lead smaller. But if I hadn't done these things, we would never have been 500. The question that was asked was, do you have 130 leaders? And let me explain how we do that. We have 3 circles of people when we look at our church. The inner group here are the leaders. Then we have the partners and the members, and then we have our friends. And this group is obviously very large. These are the people that have not committed to the church. They might not even be saved, but there are many. We expect nothing of them. But the people that choose to be members, we expect something of them. Because if you're a partner in a business, then you take responsibility. If you're a member, then you don't ask for things, you also contribute. So we expect from the partners and members that they give financially, that they attend church, that they're part of a life group, and that they serve in a capacity. So the discipleship route then becomes this way. You move people in, right? Because the leader then is the person that says, I commit to lead. And so all our life group leaders, all the life group interns, all the department leaders, all of them end up in here. Some churches will probably have another word than leader for it, like co-worker. But we chose, in our culture, it's important to provoke people with the word leader. Because it is so much easier to be a co-worker, but when you're responsible to be a leader, something else kicks in. So I've been very stubborn in using the terminology leader. This also helps me profoundly to not expect of these people things that I should not expect. In our culture, and in a traditional free church in Scandinavia, you would see all of these as equal, and you would use some kind of group pressure to make them all behave, to bake cakes and help in the choir and stuff. But if you do that on the fringes, people run away from church. The late modern individualists run when group pressure is too much. So you have to stop, say, come, and you better fix it to invitation. This is an invitation model. So you only end up in here if you're invited in, We're open.
So it's seen as a big jump from someone to become a member?
For some, yeah. Yesterday we had, twice a year we bring in new members. Part of this is culturally based because Norway is we're very high on organizational memberships. So we signed in 39 new members yesterday, and we signed in 60 new members in November. So we have a push on it, but it is rough for some people to step out. The question was, is it seen as a big step to become a member? No, for most people it's clarifying. Oh, so this is what it meant. Oh, okay, giving in church? Wow. Should I sign up for a direct debit thing on my... Wow, should I? And all of this is new for many people. In sake of time, I'll continue on with what we're saying. Create ownership to the mission, to the vision. I believe, and I will underline this, I believe that a common mission comes out in a local vision. I'm concerned sometimes that we as leaders have a tendency of making ourselves interesting by coming up with something absolutely spectacular. I don't think that's necessary. I think that the mission of God is the most important thing for us to have a handle on, and then after we understand that the mission of God in the world is the most important one, then we have our local vision in that direction. It has been very helpful for me, like I write in point B here, deep roots and theological foundation. It has been really helpful for me to just be so as clear as I can about what is the pattern of the New Testament church. Those are the roots for how I build the church today. And if you look in Acts 2:42 to 47, what you find there is that they were very concerned with the apostles' teaching. The Word of God was important. Now that must be there for a well-functioning church. In systems theory, if you lack some things in the system, you can kill the whole system. If a BMW, but two of the cylinders don't work, BMW is not a BMW because it doesn't perform as it should. But it's just two things that lacks. So I'm humble enough to say I cannot come up with this better than God did. I believe there's a design that's a unique ecclesiological design that must be present in every vision. The Word of God, the mission, they were there for something larger than themselves. They shared with the people, plus. The fellowship of the saints. Spirituality. Prayer. Communion. We can add evangelism. And we could probably also add should add one more, but that's okay.
Like social concern?
Yeah, that's okay. I know that there's a sixth one. My point is this: in the book of Acts, if you look at this is what the church should be concerned with doing. And then you place the Hungarian man in the middle like this, and you ask yourself the question, what happens to this guy when he gets into this environment? That is basically the mission of God in our world, is that late modern individuals are placed in a community that has these kinds of values, and that changes that person's life. When we teach on vision, let's take it down to the core practices of the New Testament church, and after that is settled, then we give it local flavor. Because if we forget this and we ask people to go out in the woods and hear God's voice, lots of funny things happen. Big mission, local vision. This can help steer. If we are going to see a movement in Europe of church planters, then I believe that we need to fundamentally root it theologically. Maybe I overstate this because of my tribe, but I think this is very important. Original thought based on healthy ecclesiology. Because if you do this, and you have a little bit of trouble in your leadership team, some people get fired, or they leave, or get upset, or you lack money, or building burns down, or it's so much easier to lean yourself on a Bible text when you talk about the vision of your church. You get it? Because if you stand there all by yourself, well, I was out in the woods. I talked to Jesus and he told me, I'm gonna, buy a satellite, and I'm gonna reach into Jesus over the weekend. It's so hard sometimes for visionary leaders that are disconnected theologically. It has helped me so many times. I cannot underscore this enough. I have to lean myself back and say, well, okay, people, we're back to the Vision Sunday, and I'm so glad to say that even though I have 1 meter of leadership literature published the last 5 years in my bookshelf at home, even though I have many classes in sociology, anthropology, and we have 10 wonderful psychologists in our church, and we have 14 of the best doctors in the city in our church building. We know that from all of these sciences and all these wonderful things that we know in this world, we cannot get the original thought on how we are going to build the church. There are so many good suggestions of how we can put identity into people, how we can help them steer their life in this late modern context that is secular and difficult. And I'm so glad that I am not the one coming up with the vision of this church, the underlying bedrock of how this thing is going to work, because that one we find from the text that we're going to read today. So if you go with me to the book of Acts chapter 12, verse 42 to 47, we will read the original thought of the church, and then we'll talk a little bit about our local flavor. But we bow for that thought because we're not that smart, but he is. You know what? That gives hope for people, and I advise you to do the same. So you haven't showed me any sign yet, my friend, but that's okay, because I'm good on time. So I will now talk a few minutes about developing vision. So I believe this has helped me. You don't have to believe in this, but you can listen to me for 5 minutes about it. A friend of mine helped me understand that at the forefront of your church, you need to establish that vision. Vision. That's Norwegian. Vision. This is the arrow. This is the direction of what you're building. So in our church we would say, our vision is to lead people to a new and better life following Jesus. That's our first statement. Our second statement is, our vision is to build a large, growing church in the city that multiplies and plants new churches of a similar culture and calling in new geographical areas among new culture groups and And then our third statement is, our greater vision is to be a center for training and edifying of believers, to teach them how they can find their place in the mission of God, not locally, nationally, and globally. So we have a vision that is in three. That's our style of it. So the first 7-8 years, I only talked about the first sentence, because I needed to get people to understand that you need to start following Jesus. And I spent 7-8 years on that. Now, the last 3 years, we've planted new churches. And we've seen that the Bible school has been planted. So instead of, because if there is no contact between vision and reality, people do not believe us. Maybe you can do it in Houston, Texas, but it's very difficult in the Scandinavian culture, and I believe also in the some of the continental cultures of Europe, to, who do you think you are? You know, you have voices in your head, you know, builds, you know. So I have friends that have gone out with, their visions have been way too grand, no contact between reality and vision, and people don't believe it. So I made sure, let's not talk about global, let's not talk about church planting, let's just talk about following Jesus for a while. And when we've proven that, people see it, and then they believe it, and then we can plant new churches. It has helped me. When you've established your vision, this is a helpful model. Then you write down your vision like this, you know? So that's your vision. So then you have some core words within here, like generosity. You have salvation. You have faith. All right? So what you do then is that you take some of the key words from your vision and you use them to formulate your values. Because your vision statement is necessarily the shortest. So I would say we want to lead people to a new and better life following Jesus. So then I will have a value. We have a value for leadership, because we believe that leadership is influence, and we will therefore train people to become stewards of their life so that they can influence others. That's a value. Then we have Another one, multiplication. We have a value for multiplication. Therefore, we will not build our church to 2,000 seat auditorium. We will rather plant 10 churches of 200. Because in your vision statement, there are some key words that are important for you. Use them so that your values comes out of your vision. Pretty smart. Now, then out of your vision comes the vision's manual, which says that in the year to come, we will make sure that we recruit 8 new guitar players for our worship band. In the year to come, we need to make sure that we have 13 children starting first grade in school, so we need 1 new teacher. Your strategies, no, your goals, no, your strategies. Your strategies comes out of your values. So how are you going to become more generous? We will become more generous by teaching on finance on a regular basis in a church. So how will you get more children's workers? We will spend 100,000 euros on developing children's ministers in the next 5 years. So your strategies comes out of that. Then, in the end, what are your goals? Do you see, when all of this belongs to the same pointer, then everything you do in your church will go in the same direction. Too many of us have too many documents in our computers, but they don't link. So we do this thing over here, this thing over here, this thing over here. This is a helpful way for the whole organization to follow in the same direction. This becomes too businessy and too flat, so I'm going to put on a back wall here. Because the deep dimension here, is kingdom, mission, and ethics. Do you follow? This is business plan. But how do we develop leaders? Well, that's a kingdom. That's discipleship. That's the kingdom ethics. That's you know. We put in that back wall, that dimension, that depth, so that we wouldn't become too businessy when we do this.